talk about best practices for building seat walls. Like Shaun has reviewed here, just like if you're going to use a seat wall, Brussels dimensional, or a state wall, you're going to use the standard backer. We're recommended 24-inch max height. Now that's 24-inch max height counting what's buried, correct? Because we all bury, of course, for proper installation. And we're always going to ask that you glue these standard backers just like you'd be gluing a state wall or Brussels dimensional or Rivercrest. Not only glue down to the base plate, but gluing each individual unit. There's one thing that you can do with seat walls is you can maybe space those out a little bit, okay? So maybe you don't want to have a cut and stuff like that, but what we're asking you to do is just maximum space that 1 inch. You can also do a lock bond. I don't know if you can see it real, but you got a panel that's covering 2 block. It can add a little bit more structure to the wall, something you can do with a seat wall application with the standard backers. But then again, review. Yes, you can space those out a little bit in a seat wall, but please do not go any more than 1 inch.
And with that lock bond, guys, that's also a great opportunity to run low voltage lighting wire so you're not grinding, so greater efficiency. Gino's finding a great time saving there for upselling lighting, huge there. Also, you'll see that on the display on the back side of that seat wall. You'll see that we've illustrated the lock bond like we show here, so take a look at that at break.
When you get into garden walls, a little bit more structural, right? We're going to ask that you do the same best practices, 24-inch max height. Always make sure that you backfill with clean stone. Can't tell you how many job sites I go out to, and even if it's a planter box, they're starting to lean. You got to still follow the same installation practices if it's a load-bearing wall. In this application, we're going to please ask you not to space out the backer block. All right? Just like any other product, make sure it's nice and tight. When you are constructing steps, you are going to then get into the large backer, like Shaun said earlier. Again, we're going to ask you to make sure you're gluing down to the base pads and gluing each individual block. You'll notice that when you're doing these steps with the 6-inch panel and the coping, if you build them the way that's showed right here in this diagram, it gives you a perfect 6-inch step. But then again, just because it's a step, please do not space out those backers. You want to make sure everything is nice and tight. Again, a picture of Shaun's house. Great installation, but what he did here is he built these steps to have full coping sizes. The coping for this product is a 14 by 19. What you don't want to have out there is a bunch of cuts and stuff like that and not make things looking nice. How many times have we seen this before?
That's what I didn't want, right? I don't want all these sliver cuts. So design these around the full coping length when you can, and then with your seat walls, try to design the seat walls, retaining walls around the full panel length whenever possible to help reduce cutting. Those steps there, I had 5 cuts on the front of those steps, and I had 4 on each side. That was it on the entire project. It was just built with backers and panels.
So some people think that U-Cara is just a freestanding wall, garden wall, a little bit more decorative. This is a great application right here that you can see it can be a load-bearing wall. Jason, we were in the back of the room. He built a real nice load-bearing wall, not last year, but the year before. Homeowner was looking for something different. This is one thing where, just like any other retaining wall block, you'll notice that those large backers are 12 inches in depth, okay? So whether it's U-Cara or our 𝐸𝐴, the rule of thumb is if your block is 12 inches deep, you can go 3 times that depth high before you start using grid. That also counts what's buried, okay? So just keep in mind you're doing the best practice with that. In this application, you really only need to glue down to the base pad, but because it's a double tongue and groove, you can see you do not have to glue each individual course. We are asking that you do use a filter fabric between your drainage area and your subsoils. And we may not point out here on the screen, but if you take some of those panels off, you'll see that there's the way that the clips can slide in on the corners, there is slots in there. Maybe a best practice is to use filter fabric behind the backer block in your drainage area to not have anything weeping through the face.
Yeah, great point.
And again, never, ever, ever space out these large backer when you're doing a load-bearing wall.
We're trying to make this point about when you can space and when you can't. And I went to a project at the end of my street that a contractor installed, really good contractor, and I was going like this, like, what are you doing? And he's got backers spaced where he shouldn't. He's like, well, you said in your seminars you could space the backers. And I'm like, yeah, we got to make that point of when you can and when you can't, right? It's a structural retaining wall. You can't be spacing the backers.